our trading relationship with the United States is still profoundly and adversely threatened and affected by similarly unjustified 232 tariffs against steel, aluminum, and the auto sector. The government welcomes yesterday's decision by the U.S. Court of International Trade, which is consistent with Canada's long-standing position that the U.S. IEEPA tariffs were unlawful as well as unjustified. It therefore remains the top priority of Canada's new government to establish a new economic and security relationship with the United States, continuing threats of tariffs against other strategic sectors, including lumber, semiconductors, and pharmaceuticals.
Trump thought Canada would roll over when he slapped tariffs on their maple syrup and aluminum. Instead, Canada hit back with $30 billion in counter-tariffs targeting America's political sweet spots. Why did Trump's flashy EU-style deal crumble in front of Carney's quiet, calculated strategy? And what's with this strange slogan popping up in every Canadian grocery store? Canada is not for sale. If you think this was just about trade, think again. It became a full-blown national movement. Let's see how the nice neighbor went elbows up.
What about the European Union? You said that negotiations are going nowhere. Where are the kind of points where they're
slow moving? I've been saying to everybody, they've treated us very badly over the years. It was formed in order to hurt the United States. We were restricted from, essentially restricted from selling cars into the European Union, which is not nice. And I just said it's time that we play the game the way I know how to play the game in order to take advantage of the United States, and they've done that. We have a big deficit with them. They sell millions and millions of cars, as you know, Mercedes and BMW and Volkswagen and many others.
Before we move on, I will like you to subscribe to the channel and like the video. Everyone thinks Canadians are polite pushovers until the maple syrup hits the fan. For years, the stereotype stuck. Smiles, apologies, and maybe a sternly worded letter if someone really pushed their buttons. But then came Trump rolling in with a tariff plan that looked like a page from his Win Big, Make Them Sweat playbook. He seemed sure Canada would take the EU route, smile for the cameras, agree to some half-baked framework, and let him declare victory on Twitter before dessert. Instead, Ottawa's response was closer to a hockey brawl than a trade negotiation. When Trump slapped tariffs on Canadian steel and aluminum, Canada didn't send flowers. They sent a $30 billion counter-tariff shopping list that read like a political hit job. The items weren't random. They were pointed right at industries and states Trump needed for re-election, places where losing jobs and contracts means losing votes. It wasn't just economics, it was electoral math in action.
Of course, we take good note of the comments made by the president, and of course we'll let the Prime Minister continue his negotiations and will not negotiate in public. It's been only 15 days that the Prime Minister signed an agreement with the EU to make sure that not only, of course, that we have free trade agreement, but that we are very closely aligned on defense policies. Canada is the only country on earth, along with China, that has imposed so many counter tariffs. So we have had already a very strong response, and we want to make sure that while we are putting pressure on the American administration, that at the same time we're creating, well, first we're protecting jobs while creating jobs.
Imagine picking through a grocery store with one goal: make the other guy sweat. Maple syrup, check. Aluminum and steel, check. Ketchup, lawnmowers, even certain whiskey brands, check. If it could hit a Trump-friendly state or a key congressional district, into the cart it went. Suddenly, maple syrup wasn't just for pancakes, it was a diplomatic weapon. Somewhere in the White House, you know there was a meeting where an aide had to explain to Grumpy Trumpty that breakfast condiments were now part of foreign policy. And this wasn't a scattershot approach. It was a sniper shot aimed at pockets of the US economy that could yell the loudest back home. Red state manufacturing plants, farmers shipping to Canada, and smaller suppliers that depended on smooth cross-border trade all got caught in the crossfire. It didn't take long for local papers in those states to run quotes from worried factory owners. Trucks sat idle, contracts got paused, aluminum shipments piled up at warehouses waiting for prices to settle. The impact wasn't just numbers on a spreadsheet. On both sides of the border, small businesses started to feel it. A parts manufacturer in Ontario would suddenly find their order from Ohio delayed. US suppliers noticed Canadian buyers quietly switching to European sources for goods they used to buy locally. Jobs that depended on cross-border supply chains got nervous, and so did the politicians representing them. This is where Canada's strategy broke from the usual polite neighbor script. Instead of trying to charm Trump into backing off, they made moves that forced him onto defense. For someone who thrives on dictating terms and keeping the other side off balance, this was a nightmare scenario. Canada's counter-tariffs were like throwing elbows in the corner of the rink, legal enough to keep playing, but hard enough to make the other guy think twice. By aiming policy at Trump's core political map, Canada took away his home field advantage. He couldn't just stand at a podium and declare, "We're winning," when senators from his own party were coming to him with calls from angry manufacturers. He had to react, something he hated doing. That was the point. And while the tariffs hit wallets, they also did something Trump probably didn't see coming. Back in Canada, something bigger than a trade dispute was taking shape. The anger wasn't just in Parliament, it was in supermarkets, beer commercials, even hockey arenas. What really shook him wasn't just the economic stress, but the fact that Canada's quiet pushback was starting to look like a national movement. What started as a trade fight turned into something nobody saw coming, a full-blown patriotic fashion statement that even dragged the king into it. It all kicked off after Trump tossed out one of his usual attention-grabbing lines about Canada becoming the 51st state or paying up. For a lot of Canadians, that wasn't just insulting, it was like watching someone stomp on your national flag in the middle of your living room. Overnight, there was this collective "oh hell no" energy, and it didn't stay at the political level. Sure, Carney's government was running policy, but regular people were running their own counter-offensive. Grocery aisles turned into walls of red and white pride. Canadian products stacked front and center, each one labeled so boldly you'd think you were in a tourism ad. Local beer companies started slipping not-so-subtle digs into their commercials, the kind of shade you could only catch if you knew the story. One even had a tagline about "brewed here, enjoyed by friends, not tariffs." It was Canada's version of a meme war, but in the beer aisle. Celebrities didn't sit out either. Mike Myers went on late-night TV and joked about sending Trump a lifetime supply of Canadian bacon, since he's got so much extra pork in his trade talks. William Shatner took to social media to counter Trump's bluster with a sarcastic "live long and prosper somewhere else," which Canadians happily shared like it was a national rallying cry. And at hockey games, fans weren't just cheering goals, they were chanting "elbows up" as if they were in the middle of trade negotiations themselves. This wave of pride wasn't just warm feelings, it was political fuel. Public sentiment backed every hard line Carney drew in trade talks. Normally, a leader risks backlash for turning down a deal, especially one that promises better US-Canada relations with shiny photo ops. But now, rejecting Trump's flashy EU-style agreement was practically a victory lap. People had already decided they wanted nothing watered down or vague. They wanted leverage, clarity, and maybe a few more hits to Trump's ego along the way. Then came the king's moment. During the speech from the throne, an already ceremonial event, His Majesty ended with the anthem's line, "The true north, strong and free." Anyone with a TV or Twitter account knew the clip was going to explode online. It was polite, as all royal speeches are, but it was also loaded. You could almost hear Canadians across the country exchange the same smirk. Everyone knew exactly who that line was aimed at. All this domestic energy started bleeding into actual trade strategy. Carney's government began mapping trade deals with other countries at a faster pace, moving toward agreements with Asian and European partners so Canada wouldn't be tied too tightly to the whims of the White House. It wasn't about cutting ties with the US, but it was very much about making sure the next time a grumpy Trump or any other America First loudmouth came knocking, Canada could politely say no thanks without sweating about the fallout. And while all this was happening, you can imagine Trump scrolling through Twitter, seeing pictures of Canadians lining up to buy local beer, ketchup, or camping gear purely because it wasn't American and stewing over it. For a guy who feeds on headlines and adoration, the idea of a whole country trolling him with grocery receipts had to sting. By the time the next round of talks rolled around, the government's stance wasn't just their own, it was backed by a country in full not-for-sale mode. Carney couldn't be pressured because the people wouldn't stand for it, and Trump's trademark deal-making swagger had nowhere to land. With that, the underdog had completely flipped the script and was setting the pace for what came next. Canada proved you don't need to shout louder than the bully, you can simply outthink them. While Trump was busy staging his show, Carney played the long game with targeted counter-tariffs and zero interest in signing some shiny but empty deal. That's how you turn pressure into leverage. It's a reminder that economic strength and cultural unity together can be powerful weapons. Countries can defend themselves without chest thumping or rolling over. Maybe next time, the quiet neighbor won't be underestimated. After all, sometimes when you park a bully's circus on their lawn, they'll just buy the tent and rent it out.